So welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining tonight. This is the CMSA Town Hall for the U7 to U9 Grassroots League tonight. We are delighted that there's so many of you that have joined tonight. It's really great to see such a big parent presence and maybe administrator, maybe referee presence as well to find out what's going on within CMSA and also what's happening within the U7s to U9s. So without any further ado, want to make sure that we start tonight with a land acknowledgement. And in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. And really, we want to give you an overview as well about what we do at CMSA and what we're trying to do at CMSA. What we are trying to do is to create this beautiful, vibrant community around soccer, that the culture is strong and deep, and that we are proud of being a part of the game. And so with this, we want to start tonight with a little reflection on what we've done in 2022, and a reminder of all of the accomplishments that we as a community have built and shared in over the past year. And we're really proud of what we've accomplished and what we've built together with both our clubs, our referees, our coaches, and of course, our parents and players. We look forward to building on that even greater into 2023 and beyond. And we're excited with what we can do this year and in the future. We wouldn't be able to do this without your support, without your family support, without your club support, and most of all, I'm very grateful for the team that I work with at CMSA. We've got Kim Kerr manning some of the questions tonight and helping out in her spare time. So thank you very much to Kim. Kim is a incredibly diligent, incredibly hard worker at CMSA, and honestly, I don't think we would get a quarter of the things done if it wasn't for Kim. She is definitely special, and we're definitely grateful to have her on staff and also with us tonight. And so I'll start off briefly by introducing myself as well. My name is Jordan Stewart. I'm the CMSA technical leader. I've coached players all the way from the youngest age groups. That should really be U4, U5, U6 kind of ages, all the way through to university and senior players. Previous to my role within CMSA, I was the Alberta Soccer Association regional coach for Southern Alberta and the Alberta Recs director. And my key portfolios of work were around player development, district outreach, so supporting districts with what they needed to grow and solve some of their problems with them. And then also within the coach education realm to deliver coach education and to help upskill all of our coaches within the province. I've got experience working through grassroots clubs. Both of those were in Edmonton during my time there. Professional academies at FC Edmonton, which is no longer with us, unfortunately, PSOs, youth national team development systems into youth national team camps, colleges and universities, some community outreach, and then lastly, where I'm at right now within a district governing body. And when I was first brought into CMSA, I was asked to create a technical plan. This technical plan really was the roadmap for what's going to happen with soccer over the course of 3 years. So from 2021 to 2023, coming out of a COVID-19 pandemic. You can quickly review where we're at in terms of what's ongoing, what's completed, and where we are. When I initially wrote that, I didn't think I was going to get a position with CMSA. So I wrote this ridiculously ambitious and massive technical plan and thought, I pity the sucker who has to deliver on all of this. Well, I was the sucker who had to deliver on that. So there's 3 spheres around our technical plan that are really aimed at aligning the game, developing the game, and growing the game. So the first one is around govern. And it's really around how we interact with our clubs, how we evaluate our indoor game formats, our actual match formats and outdoor, and then also our town halls like we're having tonight. The next sphere around develop, you'll see some of those red markers in terms of delayed. Some of those pieces will be coming online, probably 2023, 24, and some have just been delayed due to some random factors. But as you can see, we're making great progress on our technical plan and in the develop sphere as well as the govern sphere. And then lastly has been around the grow sphere. So really around igniting the soccer community and then building upon the great work of people past in this organization. So things like engaging with young women and girls in soccer through our Empower Her initiatives, preliminary talks around an esports league to launch and to engage with our members in a different way than ever before, and potentially the first of its kind within Canada and within a soccer organization. And then lastly, which we'll talk about a little bit tonight, is that reduction in the average travel time for matches for our families, because we know that the cost of the game is continuing to increase and we're doing everything that we possibly can to keep it economical and to remove any barriers that might be associated with the game right now. All of this is really around the player and trying to make sure that the player has the best opportunity to develop and enjoy the game. And so what's on your screen now is the Canada Soccer Player Pathway. And really what we want to talk about is these 3 stages down here for tonight a little bit in terms of your active start, which is your U4s, U3s, U6, all the way through to U6s. And then our fundamentals age groups, which is where our Grassroots League kicks in around the U7s to U9s, and then learn to train past that and where they're going. You'll see as well that we operate within levels 1, 2, 3, and then 7. We don't currently operate anything within 4, 4.55, or 6. All of these are typical senior or standards-based leagues that do operate. And as you can see, the players will flow up through the diagram and then can move laterally across those different environments as they flow through the game. I'll keep it really high level with this. If you've got any other questions or anything, please populate the chat. More than happy to come back to this and answer any questions. Or you can also look at some of our resources on YouTube, which will be published shortly, around our previous town halls within those ages and stages that'll be a little bit more detailed on this player pathway. Before every season, we always produce what we call the CMSA Program Handbook. And this is really the guide for our clubs to be opening their registration with. So what I would ask you to do is to reflect on your club's registration and what that looked like, and then to go and find this on our website. It's fairly simple to find, and it's one of our key documents. And really to see, is it aligned with what we're asking? And is it aligned and accurate to certain standards and philosophies that CMSA is trying to get through the club? I'll leave that as a little homework project if you've got time. I know everyone's busy on the call, but if you need some bedtime reading, that's a great one for you. We've also created an SQS club handbook for our clubs to help them through the standards for quality soccer process. All clubs, including the National Youth Club license holders, will go through this piece again in terms of their coaching standards and the required training for those coaches. You'll see that the deadline was a couple of days ago, if not yesterday, and we're working with some of our clubs to address some deficiencies and some of the requirements for these club licenses. One of the key aspects of this SQS is around the coaching standards that are required within it. And so there's two different roster requirements. So two different levels of training and certification for coaches. The first one is called a modified safe sport roster. And the second one is called a full safe sport roster. And so we have made it as easy as we possibly can for volunteer coaches to become involved in the game. And then for our clubs, the expectation there would be to mentor, to support, and to develop those coaches so that they stick around and continue to coach as well. The modified safe sport roster has a very bare minimum kind of requirement for coaches to undergo some training. The full safe sport roster, as you'll see in 2 slides, is a little more intensive and is geared towards a higher standard of coaching as well. Someone on the call is probably thinking, well, how do you monitor almost 2,000 coaches within the system and where they are and what their requirements are? Well, there's little loopholes that the clubs would use in terms of putting one person that's completed Respect in Sport, as an example, on all of the club rosters. And we've said that's no longer appropriate. And all coaches and team officials, including team managers, are required to complete Respect in Sport. You'll see on your screen that all coaches will need the required training to be eligible to be on rosters and to be placed within those settings. There's also a piece here that's the club needs to be accountable both to itself, but also to its members. And they need to be doing what's right, not just what's easy. And what's right is to have the properly trained coach working with players. Our data shows that when we have unqualified and untrained coaches, typically they lose around 26% of players year over year within those teams. Compare that to a qualified and trained coach, they only shed about 5% of players per year. So if we want to talk about retention and then progression and development through the game, we know that our coach training is a vital component to this, and the environment that that coach creates determines often whether a player falls in love with the game or whether they go and play another sport or take up another activity. The coaching standards that you're going to see on your screen here are absolute bare minimum. So you'll see here right at the top in terms of our U7 to U9, the expectation would be that all coaches have a valid EPIC. So an EPIC is an electronic police information check with a vulnerable sector search. So we want to make sure that we weed out any sort of risks right off the hop. They are then required to do Respect in Sport activity leader, and that's offered through the Respect group. This is a mandatory component across both the modified safe sport and the full safe sport rosters for any coach within Canada Soccer. You'll then see, if you look over, this little star here says required education for coaches and assistant coaches. So anyone who's coaching the players, we would expect that they have done a bare minimum theory course, which is an online delivery and an online module to help give them some tools through this. You'll then see recommended coach training beside there as the practical component for that fundamentals course. That practical component is an on-field exercise with a learning facilitator and other coaches, where coaches will be put through some sample activities, given some more tips and tricks, and really try to expand on their coaching knowledge. I'll pause there for a second and take a quick sip. And if there's any questions, please feel free to populate them in the chat. Okay, I'm going to keep moving a little bit for the sake of time. I know we're all busy and Survivor probably is on tonight, so we want to make sure we get through this. You'll see here, ask your coaches if they've done a practical coaching course. We've got plenty of availability left, and we've actually added a couple of more courses as well on May 26th and June 2nd for some of these courses. You'll see a great turnout. But you'll also see some of them have some big attendance gaps in there as well. So we want to make sure that our coaches are getting out, they're getting trained, and they've got some more tools in their toolbox to work with our players. We've created, again, around the modified safe sport roster, this coaching pathway, which is easy to follow for coaches and denotes where they are and where they're going. Some of them have commented that they use it more as a passport as well to mark off what they've actually completed and to track that themselves. So these resources are being created for our coaches to make sure that they're achieving a certain standard. One of the questions that we constantly get is, why does the schedule take so long to come out, and how is our schedule built? So I'll skip over some of these steps because it's not really super relevant to the conversation tonight. But what we typically have is we have a Grassroots League team entry where all of the clubs will send all of their teams to us, and we compile all of these teams, and then we look at how viable is that quadrant, how viable is this league, and how can we make this a great experience for all the players. We also then solicit all of the club TDs to give us feedback in terms of team groupings at older age groups and division formation to make sure that as many players as possible have meaningful competition every time they're on the field. We know that we're not going to get it 100% right, and we know that there's always going to be some gaps, but we're trying our best to try and close those gaps and to involve the experts, which are your club technical leads and their club staff, and trying to make sure that we take their opinions on board, because we don't know what we don't know sometimes. Within the Grassroots League, you'll see that there are preset play dates, which are Saturdays, which is when we run all of our match days. And all of those dates are already laid out within that program handbook and should be available on calgaryminersoccer.com currently. We then go to the city and we make sure that we have field permits. We align the play dates with the number of teams, with the field permits, and we build the schedule. Then there's always some manipulation by hand, and that usually is the most painstaking process. And if everyone could give a little round of applause at home for Kim. Kim has probably scheduled around 1,800 games within this Grassroots League just for this summer portion, just for this spring portion, not even including the summer portion. So a lot of work done by hand and a lot of long days that Rachel and Kim at our office put in. And I'm very, very grateful for those. Then some of our games get rescheduled. Unfortunately, if the Grassroots League match day gets rained out or the air quality is not good, then we typically cancel those days. Then we do it all over again, and we schedule around 5,000 games or 5,200 games, right and around there per season. So big process, a lot of time, a lot of love, and a lot of effort put into there. Another aspect of where we're trying to be innovators and leaders within the game here in Canada is around our bio-banding process. So really, this is a process where players can be put at a lower age group, and this is deemed based on their physical maturation rather than their chronological age. So imagine that I was small for my age, or maybe underdeveloped. I would then have the opportunity to play down age groups to find a place that's right for me. Maybe it's even just to enjoy the game a little bit more and get on the ball more, and it's for developmental reasons as well. So we want to make sure that the process is very clear. We have collaboration through our clubs with this. We have a signed form that parents sign off on as well, and that the clubs have to communicate amongst each other to make sure that there are very clear expectations for bio-banded players. There's a question on schedule. We'll probably get into that in a moment, Samantha. Conduct expectations. I would be remiss and probably be shamed if I didn't speak to everyone about what we would expect in terms of conduct for everyone within the community this outdoor. We really set the standard for what's acceptable and not acceptable. And while we probably have the cutest ones that we deal with on a weekly basis within the 7s to 9s, you might have an older child where things might get a little more heated within games. We want to make sure that players, coaches, referees, parents, and everyone involved in a match has a safe and enjoyable experience. And the days of abusing people and harassing people are simply over. We're taking a very hard stance in terms of a zero tolerance approach for any sort of abuse or harassment that happens within our games. And I use the picture there in terms of wrestling with a pig, because when you choose to hurl abuse or harassment, really you're just wrestling with a pig. And the pig enjoys it most of the time, and you just get covered in muck and you know what. So I would encourage you to relax, take a deep breath, enjoy the game, and realize that everyone at the field are not professionals. They are supposed to make mistakes, including referees and other parents. I'd encourage you to encourage your children, to support your children, and to not coach from sidelines. It is very helpful when you're supportive and not trying to coach. I'll chat quickly about three initiatives as well that we have going on, and then we will dive straight into the U7s to 9s and that specific information. Our Empower Her initiative that I spoke to briefly earlier, we've had a coach education day, which is a female-only learn to train practical session. We also have female-only entry-level courses for anyone who's interested in refereeing. We're going to host a free play day for any of our female players to come out and enjoy. These have been really, really great events. You see older women and older girls interacting with some of our youngest girls and supporting them and playing with them. And it's a phenomenal little event that happens, and it's got a really good feel-good vibe. And then lastly is around our July 20th Women's World Cup watch party. Apologies for that stutter. We want to have a 3v3 tournament pregame, and we're working with a club partner to be announced here shortly to make this event amazing. More details on that will be coming out shortly as we just finalize the last little pieces. Within the referee piece, and while the U7s to U9s don't have any referees, I wanted to make sure that I spoke to everyone about what we're trying to do to help our referees and to help recruit referees. We've had to put on extra entry-level courses this year to the tune of 3 additional ones, and we're on track to educate almost 200 referees just in Calgary alone for this upcoming outdoor season. Our referees are used from U10 all the way through to U19, depending on their rating level. And part of this has been done in conjunction with Project Ref, which we are really proud to launch with Kidsport and Hockey Calgary. So we're starting to collaborate with other organizations to find solutions and to do what's best, both for the player, but also for our own games. And Project Ref is around providing Kidsport athletes with funding to go through an entry-level course, to provide them with gear, and also to provide them with upgrading when they move up the levels of their refereeing. You'll also see from U9 as you transition into U10, likely you'll see a lot of teal shirt referees at U10. These are first-year referees that are brand new out of entry-level course and are learning how to referee. Most of these are youth, and most of them are intimidated to even blow their whistle. So the environment that we create for these new referees will determine largely if they stick around or if they don't. And our data right now shows that our referees typically stick around for 2 years or just shy of 2 years. That's the majority of them. And so then as you progress through the age groups in terms of U13 and U15 and U17, you'll notice that there's a shortened supply of referees. You'll notice that some of your games might not have a referee at all. And then you'll probably be scratching your head as to why there's no referees. Well, a lot of it starts at the U10 and 11 age groups and how our parents, coaches, and players behave that determines if these people have longevity within the game. So again, I'm asking, be gentle with teal shirt referees. They're new, they will make mistakes, and they might not even understand all of the laws of the game quite yet. But what we're trying to do to mitigate some of that is wrap them in a mentorship program where we've got more senior referees out at their games 4 times, a minimum of 4 times within their first season, to help them progress, to help them develop, and to help encourage them to stay with refereeing. And from last year, when we launched our mentorship program until now, we're also trying to educate our mentors as well, so that they get better, and in turn, our referees get better. There's also some free education that's going on right now through Sport Calgary. So if you do have some time on your hands, if you are curious and you're interested in some of these topics, please, I would encourage you to do any of them. They're all on your screen. They're all fantastic topics. And the first 3, keeping girls in sport, staying in the game, and respect in sport for parents, are all free through Sport Calgary right now. And then the last ones on your screen are all available through the National Coaching Certification Program and are available in coaches' locker accounts. If all of that sounded like gibberish, please send me an email, or please send Calgary Minor Soccer an email, and we would be happy to help you. Our email is info@calgaryminorsoccer.com. Okay, so into some of the detail, and I want to give you some background just to really reinforce why we've made certain changes and why we've done what we've done. So what we noticed is that there was a general decrease across the board in all of our age groups. And you're probably wondering, well, wait a minute, no, the U7s to U9s, it says there was a 102% increase in terms of the number of players. And the only reason that was because clubs were then required to register all of their in-house programs and their house league run programs. So you'll see a dramatic increase there. And over the course of time, you'll see that fairly steady, if not increase slightly or decrease slightly. But what we found is our players weren't sticking with the game very long. And we knew that we had to change something. We had to change numerous things, but we knew we had to start somewhere. We also looked at some of the data around how many professional players does Canada actually produce? So if we're not retaining players in the game, surely we must be producing elite top end players. And the simple answer was we weren't. Up until a CPL was put in place, we simply weren't having any sort of professional pathway for our players. You'll see that we were actually the worst in CONCACAF, and we were actually the statistically worst of the industrialized world in terms of the G20 nations at developing soccer players. But we were 10th in the world for number of registered youth players. So there's a disconnect there. And we knew that we needed to change. We knew coming out of the pandemic that a change had to happen because we no longer smoke on airplanes. Coca-Cola is no longer medicine. And we have these pesky things called seatbelts to protect our children when we're going on drives. And so what we didn't want to do is exist on the left-hand side of this diagram where we just change things for the sake of change. And we really wanted to improve. So we wanted to stack our changes and to have measurable changes over time. And we also know that the current structures and programs did not facilitate desired objectives for providing sport for all or developing those elite athletes. So we've worked on some models and worked off of some frameworks. And one of these is to address the mental and social and emotional side of the game first, because that's going to fuel the technical, tactical, and physical outcomes that we have from players. And it's going to influence if they move from participation to progression to performance along their journey. We also want to acknowledge that we exist within a very complex system. You'll see here that there is a sporting culture, that there is national governing bodies, provincial governing bodies, our district, there's media, all the way down to their own environment in terms of player pathways and peers and social media and pro clubs, etc. But at the core of it is that person. It's the player that we need to be really deeply concerned about, and that anything that we change has an impact on every single one of these levels. So we need to be cognizant of that. And we need to make sure that we think about this whenever we make any changes. I'm going to skip over this question. Usually I do this as a poll, but I'm going to skip it tonight. But as a reflection piece, just as you're sitting there, maybe listening or watching, how do you believe that your clubs and coaches select players? And what are the evaluation criteria that they actually use? I will say this, if there's any sort of player selections and tierings at U7 to U9, we will be addressing that in a very, very swift manner, very quickly. And what we found, and what Canada Soccer found through their long-term player development survey findings, was that 50% of U9 to U12 coaches said skill was how they selected players. So this is subjective, it's perceived. There's no real way of evaluating how skilled a player is. If there was, it would be some sort of passing efficiency, 1v1 duel winning. There would be 1,000 different metrics to do it objectively. And all of the research around talent ID and talent development, talent selection even, shows absolutely no correlation between skill or performance at these young ages that your children are at now and elite level performance. So we have asked the question, why do we continue with this method of selection? Because these traditional models of choosing a select number of players based on their performance levels right now, you organize them into a little team, and then they compete against other similar skilled teams, is flawed in the following ways. One, none of this predicts any sort of potential or future performance. It often turns away other players who might have high potential, but are just inexperienced at the moment relative to their peers, and they need a little more time. And that early selection prior to physical maturation, so puberty, implies the early exclusion of the majority and can discourage players who might otherwise become as good or better if they are just given the time and a great environment to develop in. And also, the characteristics that define talented athletes in their early age are not the characteristics that define elite athletes later in their careers. Often, the kid who's big, strong, fast for their age at youth levels looks good. It's a big, shiny penny that's running around the field. But what that looks like in years down the road is simply not what talented and elite athletes need at a professional, international, or even at a men's and women's level within the game here. And what we have typically in sport is we have this expectation of a linear development pathway where it's you start here and you end up there. It's constant progression and it's defined by a beginning and an end. But our reality in sport is that it looks more like this. It's nonlinear. That you go forward, you go backwards, you go up, down, sideways, left, right, you go all over the place. And that there's really, hopefully, no defined endpoint. So when you compare these two things, you'll see that there's often a disconnect. And what I will assure you is that your child's journey will look much more like the image on the right than it will on the left. So expect the ups, the downs, the lefts, the rights, expect disappointment, expect letdowns, because this is the part of the game that we know is going to be constant, and we know that there's going to be hurdles and setbacks for these kids along the way. But we can try to mitigate some of that with positive developmental settings. So I'd like you to reflect on what your club training environment looks like, what environment your coaches create, or maybe if you're a coach, what environment you create. Because positive developmental settings have physical and psychological safety. We're not just worried about the bits of glass in the goal mouth. We're worried about if players can express themselves, if they feel comfortable. Can they talk to you as a coach if they have a problem? Do they feel creative and empowered within their environment? Is there an appropriate structure? So do we have game formats and training environments that are actually appropriate for this generation of person, and also for what's going to be best to give them the tools to succeed not only in today's game, but in the future game? Are there supportive relationships amongst teammates, amongst parent groups, amongst coaches and players? And are there opportunities to belong in an inclusive and welcoming environment? Are there positive social norms where there isn't toxic masculinity being promoted all the time, and that there is a piece of equity and diversity and inclusion? Is there support for efficacy and mattering, and that children feel empowered and that their opinions are heard? Are there opportunities for skill building to fuel intrinsic and internal motivation? And is there an integration of family and school and community efforts? Because at the end of the day, the saying, "it takes a village," is never more true than in sport. These kids will need competitive teams to play against when they're older. So creating little super teams at U8 and U9 and U10 do nothing but degrade that. And it actually degrades the opportunity for everyone. So some things to reflect on as you embark on this soccer journey that's research-backed. Because the criticism of the model that I'm going to show you is often, well, there's no competition in this. There's no competition in a mini game, in a 3v3, where there might be one really good player that makes all the difference. There's no competition there. And the reality is that kids compete. And adults are the ones who compare. And you'll see in that image on the left, you'll see kids without shoes. You'll see kids in blue jeans. Who knows if there's a formal scoreboard or timekeeper, but I'll guarantee you that some of those kids know the score, that they are competing to win, that they're competing to steal that ball off of that player in possession right now. And if we continue to compare, we're going to be left with this joyless environment, because comparison is the thief of joy. And we, as adults, coming through a sport system that will look different than what we're going to embark on Saturday, we see competition as that role of master. And it doesn't actually serve the athlete in their long-term development. And what we need to think of master is more of the environment, more of the coaching, and more of the progression and retention within the sport. That's what's key. And so what's guiding us is still long-term player development and this framework that's been established over the course of the last about 15 years or so, that moves through the ages and stages to give us appropriate match formats, that gives us appropriate roadmaps to which to deliver the game for these players. All of this information is available readily online. And again, I would ask you to go, have a quick read and reflect on, does your club actually follow this? I would also like to mention this piece as well, because this is kind of the modern day LTPD, and this is what we are following within what we do. This is the Canada Soccer Grassroots Standards. And so what you'll see is you'll see it very clearly outlined what the expectations are for all soccer programs across our country and what we should be doing. Now, we've tried to align as closely as we possibly can. And when I say as closely as possible, I would say that we're probably 95% of the way there. And I'm going to be transparent and expose what we haven't aligned to and the rationale as to why. You'll see here that our U7s will play in a game format of 3v3, 3 players against 3 players. The common complaint is one of the players might like to play in goal. Well, the goal is so small. It's a 4 foot tall, by 6 foot wide pop-up goal. There's not a lot of room to score in there. Well, that creates a challenge for the other team, but it also maybe fuels that person's enjoyment that's standing in goal. So I would ask you to reflect. Maybe they just want to play in goal. Maybe something's going on at home that they want to be special today. And maybe they're comfortable playing in goal. That's not wrong. And I want to make sure that I'm very clear about that. You'll see here coach qualifications. These will be modified to align to that modified safe sport roster very shortly. You'll see maximum game durations, maximum game time per player per day. You'll see maximum goal sizes. And what I just said was 4x6. So we're not actually aligned to the 3x5 that Canada Soccer recommend. We're darn close, but we ordered 220 of these mini goals and they're not going back, unfortunately. So they're 4x6s. They're a little bit bigger and they're very efficient to put down. You'll see field sizes, you'll see ball sizes, and you'll see restarts from the sideline being pass in and dribble in. What does that look like? Well, you won't see a ball in hands thrown over the head like you will see on a Saturday morning on some subscription-based service while you're watching the English Premier League or watching the CPL or watching the Bundesliga or any other professional league. You'll see players put a ball down and dribble the ball back in. You'll see them put the ball back in or put the ball down, have a look, and pass to a teammate to restart the game. This is a quick and efficient way to restart the game so that players play more often. Then moving into our U8s and U9s, you'll see a 4v4 with no goalkeeper. Again, there's going to be kids who just want to play in goal. There's nothing wrong about that. It doesn't create an unfair advantage. In fact, that team is always a player down in possession, and the other team is always 4v3. So there is an advantage to the other team when a child decides to play in goal. You'll see maximum goal sizes here, which will look a little different, especially for our U8s and our U9s. You'll see a 4x6 goal for our U8s, and you'll see a 6 foot tall by 10 foot wide goal for our U9s because they're playing with a goalkeeper. You'll also see a larger field size for our U9s to make sure that we accommodate a bigger, stronger, faster player than a U7. You'll also see a pass in or dribble in as a restart because we want to continue to have the game played quickly and to encourage players to be creative and to get the ball back in as quickly as possible to maximize our time on the field. You'll also see things here on the back side of the document, really, which is around, is there offsides, if there's retreat lines, substitutions are any time. You'll see season lengths, team travel time, and keep in mind, Canada Soccer is creating a framework for the entire country, which is a very, very diverse and geographically different country. So we've actually tried to make this under 15 minutes within that quadrant of the city for people to get to. And we think that we're achieving that. We would love if people are like, you know what, it was an 18-minute commute, to give us a little bit of grace. But if it's a long commute, then we would like to try and address that and make it right. You'll see player to coach ratios, which align to our roster sizes. You'll see this around playing time, and players are encouraged to try all positions. And what does this say? Fair playing time for all players. Playing time is not based on ability. Playing time is based on you being interested and involved and registered in soccer. You'll also see at the bottom here, you'll see a festival format. And that's what we want to talk a little bit tonight as well, in terms of what is a festival and how does it actually operate. Because moving to these smaller rosters and into a festival format has actually given the players 3.16 times more playing time than our previous model. Now you're probably thinking, well, 3.16 times more, surely the price has gone up. And actually the price has come down a little bit, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So we've given you more for less. There will be people on the call that have kids in U9 for sure that are saying, well, in Edmonton, they play 7v7 at U9. Why do we only play 5v5? And really because we're trying to align one to Canada Soccer, and what the research is telling us is going to be best practice. And so this study was the Manchester United 4v4 pilot scheme. And what they did was compare the 4v4 format to the 8v8 format. And now I know that we're not comparing directly the 5v5 to 7v7, but we're pretty darn close. So what they did is they had a quantitative analysis where they counted the number of passes, the number of scoring attempts, goals, 1v1 encounters, dribbling skills, etc. And then they did a qualitative survey. So they asked questions on the perception of what parents and coaches and players saw on the day. And here's what the study came out with, those qualitative numbers. You'll see that they played different game formats on the day to evaluate what game format is actually going to be appropriate and what's going to help our players. We at CMSA, we have one game format thus far. So I don't want to confuse people expecting all of these different game formats. We have one game format. What they did in the study, though, is they found that the number of passes, the number of goals, having goalkeepers, a 4-goal game, all outweighed in every single one of those categories the numbers that were produced in an 8v8 game. So we're getting more 1v1 play, which is encouraging players to defend and to be creative and brave when they have the ball. We're getting more dribbling, which is more time with a player's ball at their feet, which is amazing for development. We're getting more goals, so they're enjoying the game more scoring attempts, which makes it more exciting and fun. And there's also more passes, which is a modern way of playing the game in comparison to a larger sided format in terms of 8v8. As you can see, 4v4 blew the 8v8 format out of the water in pretty much every single category. And also within the qualitative results, it was very interesting because 80% of positive comments came from club directors and coaches and administrators, people who have been involved and probably educated a little bit on it. 68% were positive comments from parents, and 75% were positive comments from players. So players seem to enjoy it compared to 8v8. Parents moderately enjoyed it, I would say, compared to 8v8, because it doesn't look and feel like what you see on the TV on a Saturday or a Sunday morning. And really that's fueled part of our decision making. So I've seen some of the questions in the chat, which I hope Kim has gotten to, but what is it that this is? So what do we have is a quadrant-based match day for our Grassroots League. And we want to make these game days as close to home as possible. We also have what's called open rosters. So open rosters is a concept where the player is not signed to a set fixed team and roster, and that they're able to be transferred and play with any other players and any other team or group on the match day from within their club. So hopefully your club and your club technical lead, who's supposed to be there on the day, is watching the matches and going, those players aren't getting what they need out of that game. I'm actually going to change these two with those two and swap them. Or maybe I'm going to change this entire group with this other group in our club because it's just not right those players are not getting what they need. It's up to them to make those decisions because they are the ones at the end of the day who know the players and know the challenges and environment that's going to help these kids fall in love with the game. You'll also see, as we talked about, small-sided game formats to maximize development touches and, of course, goals. And in a survey from Amanda Visick, which is the fun integration theory, this is fantastic research that's really fueling a lot of the changes within all of sport right now, is that 80% of parents and 93% of players, 94% of coaches indicated that playing time was very to extremely important to youth sport participation. So when I talked about that 3.16 times more playing time that we've been able to give the players, we feel as though we're satisfying this with more playing time every single match day for these players. We want to make sure that we foster a sense of community and connection at these match day hubs. And this is really necessary because it establishes the necessary social climate to motivate children to develop. And that the competitive nature of sport often undermines a sense of that community, especially in youth sport leagues. Again, we talked about aligning to research and best practice. This is straight from the research. And we know that if we take the game far too serious at these levels, that we are going to steal all of the playfulness from these players. We're going to steal the joy from these players. And there's going to be moments where one group is significantly better than another group on the match day. It's up to us as adults, us as coaches, us in clubs as technical leaders to address that and to make sure that we're managing those games appropriately. Into a little bit of the detail on what these are going to look like. I've already talked about 3v3 and a dribble in. You're going to see 3 20-minute matches on each match day for our U7s. So super fast to meet the shortened attention span of younger children, and also to minimize the opportunity for significantly lopsided games. Our previous traditional model would have seen one team versus another team for a 45 to 50-minute game. Now, obviously, if those are very mismatched, it's going to be a painful experience for one and not a developmentally appropriate experience for another. So a 20-minute match allows players to get into a rhythm, allows them to score a few goals, and then poof, we rotate around and we find another game. Our CMSA staff will be on site to help with the logistics of these days to make sure things are running smoothly. You'll also see a very unprofessionalized and maybe unsterilized format of the game that doesn't have formal kickoffs after goals are scored. So we encourage teams, if they score a goal, run back and touch your goal, and the other team can dig the ball out of their net and continue to play right away. Again, it's about time on task, and it's about keeping the ball rolling and maximizing touches. This strategy also gives an opportunity that if a team is scoring a lot of goals, they then drop off without having to have a retreat line, and that other team can gain some territory and keep the ball away from their net and hopefully go and score one on their own. So it's a method to not having more rules and more structure in what would be a playful and enjoyable environment for these players. You'll also see that there's no formal scores or standings posted within these age groups. Oddly enough, our U8s look very similar to our U7s, with the exception of 4v4, so an extra player per team on each field. Our U9s is where it starts to look and feel like more formalized soccer. And again, a logical building block as they get older and as they can mentally comprehend some more pieces. You'll still see a dribble or a pass in, but you'll see 2 25-minute matches on each match day, where you'll play one match, you'll hear a whistle or a horn, and then you'll rotate and find another match on the day. There's an increased variation of opponents compared to that traditional model. And again, there's going to be no formal scores and standings kept from these match days. We also want to talk about some of our player groupings and how we've been trying to improve this delivery over the course of time. Our player groupings are probably one of the most important pieces, and I'll get into that in a second, but I'll talk quickly about one of the modifications from last outdoor. We've tried to expand our field sizes so that they are bigger, so that players have more room, more time on the ball, and they've got more ability to express themselves. This is obviously meant for, or this is meant that some groups have been moved a little bit later in the day, just based on where we're hosting these match days. But we want to try and maximize the space as much as we can. What this will mean for parents is that you will see a skinny channel between fields. Please do not put your lawn chairs in those skinny channels. There will be enough people in there in terms of subs for their teams or coaches that we don't need additional people in those areas. Please sit on the exterior of all of the fields, and our staff will be there to help manage this on the days on Saturday, to make sure that there's an understanding. So hopefully they're polite, and I'll make sure that they're polite. But if they politely ask you to move, it's just for a player safety piece and also a coach safety piece, because the channel in between the fields is very thin. So we don't want a child running into or falling into a stationary lawn chair, or a child ending up on your lap and potentially hurting you. It's not a Lakers game. We're not going to sit courtside. So just something to keep in mind. How we've advocated for the clubs to be grouping their players and encouraging their players to be grouped on every single match day is outlined on your screen. So social relationships we define as maybe they go to church together, maybe they live down the road together, maybe they're in the same class, maybe they're just friends at soccer. Can we put those people together and let them play? Friends play with friends. More unstructured. It's not purely based on ability, and that some of the less developed players get an opportunity to play with some of the more developed players. That, of course, presents its own challenges. And me as a coach in some of my former roles have definitely seen those challenges, but it's about how we manage them and how we overcome those challenges that can make this model very, very beautiful. Then you'll see some match days based on ability. So we would love like with like players put together, and for our club technical leads on the day to be managing those games so that we do have players that are of similar ability playing against players of similar ability. There's some research to suggest that grouping all players within a mixed ability actually produces better outcomes long-term, as opposed to grouping them all less developed, middle of the road, early developer, and more developed all together. There's some research that suggests that it should just be a mixed ability grouping anyway. Managing the logistics of the match day can seem daunting, but it's really quite simple. Once you arrive to the field, please find your club's technical leader on the day, and they will help to coordinate where you're supposed to be and where your players are meant to be playing. If you need additional assistance, Calgary Minor Soccer Association employees will be there to help manage the flow of the day, to help find your field, and to help make sure that kids are enjoying their experience. On match day, players are going to show up in their groups, ready to play. But should there be some lopsided games, this concept of open rosters gives clubs and coaches the ability to move groups of players from one field to another in order to find more meaningful competition and players that are around the same ability. We can move entire groups and swap them with one another within your club, or we can move individual players that can balance out the groups from game to game. In order to move the players, it would be recommended that you contact your club's technical lead during the game by either giving them a quick phone call or putting your hand up and allowing that technical lead to facilitate the rearrangement of the groups or players from game to game. That's a key function of the club's technical lead on the day, is to make sure that all of their groups are finding meaningful competition and connecting in with the coaches of those groups. Fun, safe, and fair. When we talk about fair, we mean
even matchups and players having meaningful competition on the day, and also making sure that your players are getting even and equitable playing time amongst all of them.
Someone on the call is probably like, why didn't we just watch the video and save 10 minutes of chatter? There you go. That resource is living on our YouTube page at all times. It was developed about a year ago, so it's starting to show its age a little bit, and we've modified some pieces. So we'll look to update that in the coming seasons. We've also got some strategies for lopsided games where if a team is up by 4 or more goals, we would encourage that team that's down to add an extra player to the field. There's no shame in this. If this was in the schoolyard at recess, we know that there's unbalanced teams all the time where 9 players play against 6. This is no different. We can do this, and this is a deep-rooted cultural change that we can have happen, and that will be for the benefit of the player. We can also mix them up. If it's really not going well, why don't we just mix up all the players between the 2 clubs and have a reasonably even game? And then at U9s, maybe we just swap the goalkeepers so that one goalkeeper sees a lot of action, the other one gets a little bit of a rest. Yeah, we could maybe speak to this. We might look to pilot some alternative match forms this outdoor. We'll see where we get to on this one. And we might look to do some additional research. I want to kind of float that out there right now. This is a big maybe, so I'll just skip over it for now. You'll see on your screen the locations that all of the clubs are at as well. So if you can find your club, you'll know where to show up and what schedules to look at if you haven't already been informed. If there are questions, please email your club to ask them questions. Those match day locations are on your screen now in terms of the Genesis Center in the Northeast, Dalhousie Community Association in the Northwest, Andrew Sibbald School down in Lake Bonavista and for the South, and the Central Group will play at Bishop Carroll High School this year. We want to make sure that there's an awareness of what the role of the club actually is, and it's lengthy. Our roles are lengthy as well. So if you want, please review this through the Grassroots League handbook that's been supplied to you today. Rewatch this on YouTube or quickly skim what's on your screen. Essentially, your club is responsible for registering the players, managing match day rosters, rearranging them, and also communicating with parents on the day for any questions club related that they might have. You'll see it's extensive. No one likes a wordy slide, but I wanted to make sure it was out there and that there was some awareness of it. Their responsibility as well is to try and monitor coach behavior in these mini matches and enforce some proper coaching behavior. So is there equal playing time? Is it a psychologically safe environment that kids aren't being just shouted at? Are we modeling positive sportspersonship? And are we working cooperatively with the opposing team's coach to facilitate the game for the children? Can we work together as adults, regardless of colors, regardless of badge, to put these kids first, especially at these young ages? Our role as CMSA is we determine the quadrants the clubs are in, we book all the fields, we create all those schedules and handle those logistical pieces. And then on match day, we're setting things up, we're managing the flow of people, we're timing all the matches, we're attending to emergencies. There's always going to be a first aid kit on site, and there will be a ball pump on site as well for any potentially flat soccer balls. Getting to the end here, and then you can dump all of your questions into the Q&A if you like. We wanted to make sure that there is an awareness as well about the player fees that come into CMSA at these young age groups. So we've moved to a per player registration fee within CMSA. So our clubs will collect a registration fee from the families, and those clubs then forward a certain amount onto CMSA. By the age of player, it adjusts, and you'll see there on your screen that CMSA collects $17 for every U7 player, $19.25 for every U8 player, and $30 for every U9 player. Then out of that comes an ASA fee of $6 each. So that goes straight to Alberta Soccer. So what we're left with now is $11, $12.75, and $24 across the U7s to U9s respectively. And your price per match day is $1.57 for the U7. So every time you show up to one of those locations, it costs $1.57 or $1.82 or $3.43. So this is something that we are unbelievably proud of in terms of how economical we are keeping the game for our clubs and for our families. And within this, if your clubs have got a Shane Holmes jersey as well, they actually receive free jersey, shorts, and socks. So if you compare that, for $17, a U7 player is getting a jersey, shorts, socks, and 7 match days, all for the cost of under $2, less than a cup of coffee per match day. I would challenge any sport to try and do that. I'd encourage you to also reflect on potentially the total fee that is paid. Now, someone's going to ask the question, what do we actually get for that fee from CMSA? Well, what you get is, this is where it's being distributed. The majority of those fees collected go towards the league costs, all of our league costs. So paying our referees, other league related expenses, booking fields, that's where the majority of those costs actually are. There's also a very small portion and percentage that go into a facility fund contribution so that we can continue to upgrade current facilities and also fund future facility projects like the Shouldice bubble that was put up this winter, and previous to that, the Calgary West Soccer Center renovation, where we have now a FIFA Pro quality turf pitch and one of only 2 in all of Canada. And we're very proud of that center, and we're very proud of that field. So these are the things that we're trying to improve as well, to improve the experience. There's also a portion that is donated to Kidsport, because they are a massive funder of player registrations within Calgary here, to the tune of, it's either $250,000 or $500,000 goes back into soccer from Kidsport. We are the largest recipient of any Kidsport funding, not in terms of CMSA being the recipient, but those players and families. Soccer as a whole is the largest recipient. So we want to make sure that we're giving back to that. Alberta Soccer and Canada Soccer take a portion of those registration fees, and then a small portion helps to pay for people like myself to deliver this information to you, to keep the lights on in our office, and to keep some ink in the printer, really, to try and run this sport as efficiently as possible and to continue to innovate its delivery. If any of the players that you know in your family or are in the U7 to U9 Grassroots League, if they get injured, it's important that you fill out a form on Alberta Soccer's website, because that Alberta Soccer fee goes towards providing insurance for all of your children. So you have to fill out that form within 30 days of injury, and that's located on Alberta Soccer's website under the membership tab. You will use up any sort of personal insurance first, and then the Alberta Soccer insurance money kicks in after that personal insurance funds are used up. Sometimes physio and rehab expenses can add up quickly and exhaust that personal insurance. Now, most of the players that we're talking about on this call tonight are like rubber bands and likely will not get injured, but you never know. Sometimes someone falls and breaks an arm and needs some rehab and physio. So make sure that you know about the ASA insurance, and make sure you access it if you need it. So the chat's been really, really quiet, and the Q&A has been quiet, which is lovely. So I'll leave you with this video and give you a time to reflect on any questions that you might have, and really tune in on some of the messaging within this video, because we think it's very important, and we think this is what we're trying to develop within Calgary here and within the soccer community. All right. And while that was our registration campaign for this past outdoor, really those key themes of belonging and challenge, development, fun, community. Those are what we're trying to bring together. And especially at these grassroots ages, these U7s to U9s have got a great opportunity to come together, us as parents, as coaches, as administrators, to give the game back to the kids and to give them an amazing experience come a match day. So I will say thank you to everyone who's been involved and spent some time with us tonight. It is much appreciated that you're curious, that you're wanting to find out more, and that you're interested in this. This means a lot to us. And if there are any questions at all, you can either populate them into the Q&A or feel free to reach out via email or via phone. The details are on your screen. And you can also connect with us across social media in terms of Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and I believe we're on TikTok now, but I don't have that handle. So if anyone's on TikTok and wants to give that a follow, please do. I always close all of my presentations with that image on the left, where if we all continue to pull in a similar direction, like on the right-hand side there, we'll make gains so much quicker than if we all work in opposition of each other, and if we really don't have a common vision and direction. So I'd again like to thank you for the time spent tonight. Thank you for your investment into your children and into the game that we all love and care about. And I'll open it up to any in the Q&A right now. There's a question there that Kim's addressing, and Kim would be the expert to address in terms of why the players from the team are not showing up in Demisphere. This might actually be a good question to answer live as well. So when Kim's done typing, I will read her response on this webinar as well. This seems to be a common question across multiple teams and clubs and such that we've tried to communicate multiple times, both through the clubs and directly to coaches and managers. So let's clear it up for anyone who might have that same question tonight. If you have a question, please dump it into the Q&A. I'm more than happy to answer any of those and go from there. So Kim's responded with, that's a question for your club. If you're looking at your roster and if all the players don't have a proof of age or waiver, they might not show up on those rosters. So you're going to have to chase them down for that necessary information and those necessary documents to make sure that they are eligible to play. I'm just gonna wait for another few minutes, and if there are no questions, amazing, that's great. I look forward to seeing you on the pitch on Saturday. I'll be potentially at one of the locations helping to at least get it going and get things started. We are training some more new staff, so please be gentle. They are learning as well. Expect some chaos. And the first match day is always the worst one, we've learned, and they get significantly better, significantly quicker as well. So expect a bit of chaos, expect a bit of disorganization, expect some people to not know where they're going. We're going to try our best to help alleviate any of those concerns. And once we get into the flow of it, it's a very simple system and it's a very simple model. So please be patient, and we look forward to seeing you on the pitch on Saturday and working with you and providing a great experience for your children. So if there are no other questions, we'll look to end things there, and I will wish everyone a good night. And again, we'll see you Saturday on the pitch.